dbt has become one of the most talked about and used platforms in the data community. In this video, I want to go over 5 concepts from dbt that I think are super applicable to anyone who works with data. This platform represents a bunch of ideas about what the future of using data for business looks like. And even if you're not necessarily using dbt, these concepts are super applicable to help understand how businesses can start to use data as a first-class product and become extremely data mature in the coming years. So putting this boring definition aside, I'm going to go over what dbt is first. Now, you can see lots of marketing content that make it seem like the greatest thing since sliced bread. And in some ways it is. But in order to understand this, we need to use real examples so that you can truly understand why data engineers swear by this tool. Now, thankfully, and for anyone curious about trying this on their own, dbt offers their core product completely free and open source. Now, they've obviously made a business decision to switch to a cloud-hosted subscription service model, but the core of the platform can be downloaded completely for free using either GitHub or downloading it as a Python library. And I'm going to be using that today to demonstrate all of the concepts. What I'm showing today, this setup of dbt Core, is possible to use in a business environment. Now, their cloud offering, you obviously are paying more, but you're getting a lot of nice features and their hosting services to make the technical support as minimal as possible. So that's a trade-off that businesses need to think about on their own, as well as I believe moving forward, as is the nature with open source businesses, some features are only going to be available on the paid product. So interpret that both good and bad. The nice thing is for this video, everything we're going to be doing is using the open source product. At its core, dbt is a platform for transforming raw data from your business systems into actionable insights like we're seeing on the screen. Let's take a look at how we're getting to these 2 yield charts. We can look at the dbt lineage to see how the orchestration from the raw data on the left side, so data coming out of an MES system, goes through layers of transformation in order to get to the 2 reports that we're seeing on the dashboard. This is the crux of what makes dbt so powerful. It offers a ton of awesome ways to organize in a traceable way the lineage of your data, meaning you can separate business logic, you can use it in multiple different reports, but also you can orchestrate these reports to run at different intervals. So really intensive reports, perhaps this production by resource one, can run on a lower frequency to reduce the amount of compute time that your data warehouse is going through. Meanwhile, these final stage reports might only be processing higher level aggregated data, so it's much better for them to run at a high rate. A huge reason for dbt's popularity is because of it being foundationally built on the SQL querying language. I'm not going to get too into that today. I have a tutorial series on Manufacturing SQL. If anyone is interested, I'll leave a link up here and probably down below. But the main thing to know is that we are grabbing data through these queries, and dbt is handling all of the orchestration and development of these charts and all sorts of other things directly from the code repository. So everything that's built in dbt is built using a bunch of nested SQL statements that look like this. So we can see the yield by resource report is based on production by resource and scrap by resource. And that's all we had to write for dbt to take all of this information and turn it into a orchestration system. So here at the bottom, we can see the most recent run where dbt is going through all of the queries that are written and running them in the optimal order in the correct sequence to generate up-to-date data whenever you need. So another awesome benefit of moving to a system like this is the documentation functionality that's built into your data orchestration platform. So for example, let's say that I'm seeing some weird numbers coming through on my yield report and I can't quite figure out why. I can go to a chart like this and look through the lineage, and perhaps I'm curious that maybe daily production by resource doesn't work the way that I expect it to. So I can go into documentation on this table. Now you can configure all of this in your code base. So I can see all of this description information has been put in to the code base, and anyone who opens the DBT browsing tool can look through this kind of like a Wikipedia repository of all the information about your data. And it's baked into where the queries are actually generated. This isn't some secondhand Confluence page that's been put together manually. It's all connected. And so we can see, maybe we look at the description and maybe the columns. Here, we can look at what is actually feeding the data. And so, if I recall correctly, there's a description here on the quantity that says the amount of material moved through the resource. Note that this is tracked in the primary UOM, which effectively makes this table useless if you're looking at a resource that operates across multiple UOMs. So what does that mean? I'm not going to get too far into the weeds, but basically something in this data is making an assumption, which is bad, but at least the person who put this together, which was me, made sure to note the assumption that they were making and leave this for anyone who's confused in the future. And again, this is all baked into the lineage system. So we know that if something's going wrong with daily production by resource, it's impacting all of these tables that get data from there. So now, being the go-getter, data lover employee that I am, I'm going to go in and fix this query. Now, the more you think about it, the more you can start to understand why the original analyst may have avoided this. But basically what we need to do is multiply the quantity times some conversion rate, unless it doesn't exist. And so then we're going to multiply it by 1. And I'm going to copy in some code here. If you know what I'm doing, it's not rocket science, but these extra steps now set up my query to reference a UOM conversion table and multiply that for certain products. So what I can also now do as a developer is test everything that I'm changing, really. So now in perhaps my local development environment, I can run dbt build, which is the command for running all, and we can see something is not quite right. Perfect. So good thing I tested this in my local environment. I spelled conversion rate wrong. I'm going to save, run this test one more time, and voila, everything's passed. Now I want to go ahead and publish these changes to perhaps the cloud repository that truly orchestrates our production data. So I'm going to say fixed daily production with UOM conversion, and I'm going to push that up to our official repository. Obviously, in a professional environment, there'd probably be some approval workflows. All of these things are possible when you start working with a repository-based format. And so now we can access the version history of our queries. So this is a huge, huge value proposition of switching to DBT, is that now we know and have perfect traceability to who changed the logic behind that table and on what day. And we can see, okay, if weekly yield by resource starts producing different numbers now, which I fully expect if I refresh this page to see some slight changes now that I've adjusted the way that yield is calculated. It's hard to tell, but let's assume that some of these values have been changed. We can see that daily production by resource was changed on, this date, and that can be the explanation for data changing. And this becomes super useful as you, again, have much more complex ecosystems of nested data. Now, the final piece that I think really sends this whole concept out of the park is everything that we've shown can be applied to generating data, but it can also be applied to testing data, which is a super critical piece of good data infrastructure that most Excel users and even advanced data teams are not really thinking about that often. So everything that I've shown, the documentation, the version control, the lineage, can all also be connected to tests. So here I've written a very simple test to make sure that my yield reports never output a yield greater than 100%, because that just, doesn't make sense. This lives in your repository, and no matter how many changes or what data is coming into the system, this is going to run along with your scheduled jobs and just do a quick check to make sure that nothing's over 100. And best case, you never have to think about this. It just lives and runs every now and then, and it's always passing. But for example, let's say some doofus like myself goes in to the yield report and changes the way that we calculate percentage. So here I've just changed the multiplication factor from 100 to 1,000. And I'm thinking that my code is all good. This isn't going to flag any issues. I might not even see it in the reporting because it's scaling linearly. But this could really screw up somebody else's data reporting if they are making a hard assumption that this is a base 100 yield calculation. So now when I go to ship this change that I've made, it's going to run that test. And it's obviously going to run things in order. So it's going to generate this query and then run the test. And we're going to get a nice red message that says, check yield over 100 has failed. And this is really the moment where everything starts to become super scalable and robust for data teams, is that you can build flexible testing in the same way that you build your reports in the same ecosystem. So this test is available inside of the DBT docs. We can even read some information about it. We can see this check yield over 100 is connected to these two reports, and I can go to the documentation, see the query, and read, if anyone had written a description, a little bit more about that test. So this kind of completes the ecosystem and demonstrates what DBT is as an end-to-end data transformation and testing platform. So I hope that this video has explained the key concepts that have made DBT such a wildly successful product in the data sphere. Over the next few years, I expect these concepts to trickle into the day-to-day jobs of all business analyst type roles. If you want to work with data, you have to understand these concepts, because even if you don't know how to code, they're coming in other platforms and other ways through drag and drop interfaces and simple programming languages to enable this same type of functionality. It's going to be super critical as data becomes an even larger part of business operations. I hope that this demonstration provides you with insight into how DBT works, but also what the future of using data looks like. It's going to be a future where everyone can collaborate and share nested layers of data like we're seeing on the screen to get to these final reports. It's also going to have a ton of good, or hopefully better than what we've currently got, documentation about what this data is truly doing. We're going to have version control that allows us to track and see what changed on what date and by who, so that we always can understand shifts in our data. And we're going to utilize testing that's built into our data orchestration tools that allows us to make sure our data is accurate and following the assumptions as it goes from developer to developer over the years. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you've learned something from this video. I hope you're excited about the future of data engineering. I'm excited to learn more, and I'm excited to learn more from you all. So please let me know what you think, either in the comments down below, reach out to me on LinkedIn or any other platforms. I appreciate you all. If you've enjoyed this content, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already, and stay tuned for more great content.